Before the dinner service ever began, the maitre received a phone call from the owner's private line, and every server on the floor was told to stop what they were doing and wait. That detail came out later. At the time, no one in the dining room knew why the kitchen had gone quiet. Warren Carter had made the reservation 6 weeks in advance. He had done it the way he did most things, carefully without drawing attention to the process. The table was for two, himself and his son, Philip, who was flying in from Portland for the weekend. It was Philip's 32nd birthday. Warren had chosen Aldridge, the restaurant on the 42nd floor of the Harrington Tower in downtown Chicago, because Philip had mentioned it once, 8 months ago, in a phone call that lasted 11 minutes, and Warren had written the name down afterward in the small notebook he kept in his jacket pocket. The notebook had a brown cover and no label. He had been using the same brand for 23 years. The reservation had been confirmed twice, once by email when he booked it, and again 3 days before the dinner when he called to verify. The woman on the phone had been courteous. She had confirmed the name, the time, the table preference, and the occasion. Warren had thanked her and ended the call. He arrived at 7:08 p.m. He was wearing a sport coat the color of charcoal over a dark sweater, pressed slacks, clean shoes. Nothing about him announced anything. That was by now simply how he moved through the world. The lobby of the Harrington was the kind of space designed to communicate something to the people who walked into it. Warren noticed this without comment. He took the elevator to the 42nd floor and found the hostess stand for Aldridge positioned at the far end of a short corridor lined with brushed steel panels and indirect lighting. The hostess was a young woman named Tara Feld. She had a clipboard and a small earpiece and the practiced composure of someone who had been trained to read guests before they spoke. She looked at Warren for approximately 2 seconds before her expression settled into something carefully neutral. "Good evening," she said. "Do you have a reservation?" "Carter," he said. 8 o'clock. I'm a little early." She looked at the clipboard. He watched her find it. "Carter. Party of 2, she said. "Your guest hasn't arrived yet, that's right." She set the clipboard down and did not move toward the dining room. "I'm going to need to seat you once your complete party is here," she said. "It's our policy during peak hours." Warren had eaten at enough restaurants to know this was not unusual. He nodded and stepped to the side of the corridor to wait. He checked his phone. Philip had texted 20 minutes earlier to say he was in a cab from O'Hare and running slightly behind. Warren typed back 2 words, "No rush," and put the phone away. He stood near the wall and watched people move through the corridor. He was good at waiting. It was one of the things the work had given him. At 7:41, Philip Carter came out of the elevator in a blue jacket and the slightly wind-blown look of someone who had been traveling since morning. He was taller than his father by 2 inches and had his mother's eyes and the particular energy of a person who had not yet learned how to be still. Warren felt something move in his chest when he saw him, some quiet, reliable thing, and he raised one hand in a brief wave. "Dad." Philip reached him and they embraced the way they had always embraced, briefly and with meaning. "Sorry, the traffic from O'Hare was—" "I know," Warren said. "I wasn't waiting long." They turned together toward the hostess stand. Tara Feld was speaking to a couple near the far end of the corridor, but a second host, a young man Warren hadn't noticed before, was behind the stand. His name tag read Corey. "Carter," Warren said. "Reservation at 8. Corey looked at the clipboard. Then he looked up at them both. Then he looked back down. "Could you give me just 1 moment," he said, and he picked up a small phone handset behind the stand and spoke into it quietly. Warren waited. Corey put the handset down. "I'm going to get our manager for you," he said, and walked away before Warren could respond. Philip leaned slightly toward his father. "Is something wrong?" "I don't know yet," Warren said. The manager, who appeared from behind a side door, was a man named Griffin Hartley. He was somewhere in his mid-40s, in a dark suit with a pocket square, and he carried the practiced authority of someone who managed difficult situations by controlling the frame of them. "Mr. Carter," Griffin said. He didn't extend his hand. "I appreciate your patience. I'm the floor manager, Griffin Hartley. There seems to be a situation with your reservation." "What situation?" Warren said. "We have your reservation on file," Griffin said, "but unfortunately the table you were assigned has been allocated to another party, a long-standing client of ours who made a specific request this evening. We should have contacted you beforehand, and I apologize that we didn't. We do have availability in our adjacent dining room, which offers the same menu. We reserved a window table," Warren said. He said it the way he said most things, without heat, but without softness either. 6 weeks ago. It was confirmed. I understand that, and I'm sorry for the inconvenience. I'm not describing an inconvenience, Warren said. I'm describing a commitment you made. Griffin's expression didn't change. The adjacent dining room is a very comfortable space, he said, and we would of course like to offer you and your guest a complimentary appetizer for the trouble. Who has the table? Philip said. Both men looked at him. Warren said nothing. I'm just asking, Philip said. If someone is sitting at our table right now, I'd like to know who decided that was an acceptable thing to do. That's not information I can share, Griffin said. No, Warren said quietly. I imagine it isn't. There was a pause in the corridor. Tara Feld had drifted back toward the stand and was pretending to look at the clipboard. Corey had not reappeared. From inside the dining room, through the partially open doors, came the sound of flatware and low conversation and the soft, expensive silence of a room that believed it was the only room that mattered. We'd like to be seated, Warren said. At the table we reserved. Griffin looked at him for a moment, the kind of look that was measuring something without wanting to appear to be doing so, and then he said, I'm not able to accommodate that this evening. I'm sorry. Warren looked at him. He did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He had spent 26 years in a profession that had taught him, among other things, that the right response to an immovable obstacle was not force but observation. He made a note of the time, 7:53 p.m., and he took out his phone. I'd like the name of the ownership group, he said. You're welcome to contact us through our website, Griffin said. That's not what I asked. Griffin gave him a card. The card had the restaurant's name and the name of a hospitality group, Aldridge Partners, LLC, and a general contact email. Warren looked at it once and put it in his jacket pocket. Philip was watching his father with the focused attention of someone who had grown up watching his father and had learned that the stillness meant something. Let's go, Warren said to him. They walked back through the corridor toward the elevator. Neither of them spoke until the elevator doors had closed. What just happened? Philip said. Warren looked at the floor numbers descending. I'm not entirely sure yet, he said, but I have some thoughts. What Warren Carter did not say in that elevator, what he had not said to Griffin Hartley, and would not say to anyone that night, was that he had been in that building before, not in the restaurant, in the offices below it, specifically on the 28th floor, where the Chicago branch of a federal oversight agency maintained a division that Warren had consulted for on 3 separate occasions over the past decade. His work, structural risk assessment for public infrastructure, had taken him into rooms that were not meant to appear on public schedules, and into conversations that were not meant to appear anywhere at all. He did not think of himself as important. He thought of himself as useful, which was a different thing and a quieter one. He also knew, because he paid attention to the things he read, that Aldridge Partners LLC had appeared 18 months ago in a piece of financial reporting about hospitality groups with connections to a city council rezoning decision. He had read the piece once on a Tuesday morning while drinking coffee at his kitchen table in Evanston. He had not thought about it again until Griffin Hartley handed him that card. He filed this information away and said nothing about it. In the lobby of the Harrington, Philip said, There's a steakhouse 3 blocks east. Marcus went there last year and said it was good. All right, Warren said. They walked 3 blocks east in the November air. Philip talked about his flight and about a project at work, and about a woman named Celia who had given him directions at the airport, without being asked, and had seemed, in retrospect, like someone worth knowing. Warren listened to all of it with full attention. This was another thing the work had given him, the ability to hold multiple tracks of thoughts simultaneously without letting any of them show. The steakhouse was warm and loud and unconcerned with itself. They were seated immediately. The food was good. Philip ordered a bourbon and Warren ordered sparkling water, and they talked for 2.5 hours about things that mattered and things that didn't, which was the same conversation they always had, and it was enough. When the check came, Philip reached for it. Let me, Warren said. Dad, it's your birthday, Warren said, and Philip let him take it. On the walk back to the hotel where Philip was staying, they stopped at a corner and waited for the light. The Harrington Tower was visible 2 blocks north, its upper floors lit against the sky. Philip looked at it. Are you going to do something about what happened tonight? Probably, Warren said. What are you going to do? The light changed. They crossed. I don't know yet, Warren said. Something measured. He wrote the email that night from his apartment in Evanston, at the kitchen table where he read the morning paper. He had looked up the ownership structure of Aldridge Partners, LLC, using 3 public databases he accessed regularly for work. The managing partner was a man named Roderick Haynes, whose name appeared in connection with 2 other hospitality properties in the metropolitan area and 1 commercial real estate venture with pending zoning review. Warren did not know Roderick Haynes. He had no reason to contact him directly. What he did have was the name and direct phone number of a woman named Patricia Lund, who was the regional director of the Illinois Department of Human Rights. He had met her once 4 years ago at a conference in Springfield, and they had spoken briefly about structural equity in public contracting. He had her card in a drawer in his desk. He did not call Patricia Lund that night. He wrote the email, a precise factual account of what had occurred, with the time, the name of the floor manager, the name of the restaurant, the confirmation number of the reservation, and a specific question about whether the behavior he had experienced met the threshold for investigation under the Illinois Human Rights Act. He read it twice, made 2 small edits, and sent it. Then he closed his laptop and went to bed. He slept without difficulty. He had a physical exam scheduled for the following Tuesday, and a site review in Joliet the week after, and a call with Philip on Sunday to make sure he had gotten back to Portland safely. The evening had been unpleasant, but unpleasantness was not the same as damage. He understood the difference. What Warren did not know, because no one told him until much later, was what had happened on the 42nd floor while he and Philip were walking east toward the steakhouse. The table they had been removed from, the window table, with the view of the lake, had been given to a party of 4 that included a man named Brendan Voss, who was a regular client of Aldridge, and who had called the restaurant that afternoon to request that specific table for a dinner he was hosting. Griffin Hartley had accommodated the request without informing the restaurant's owner, a man named Charles Delaney, who was not present that evening, but who received a summary of floor operations each morning from his general manager. The summary that arrived in Charles Delaney's inbox at 7:15 the following morning included a notation from Tara Feld, who had written a short incident note as part of her end-of-shift report. Reserved window table reallocated to walk-in party, Voss, per GFH instruction. Original party, Carter 2, denied seating and offered alternative. Declined and departed. No comp issued. Offer made, not accepted. Noting for record, Charles Delaney read this at his desk in Lincoln Park while drinking his 2nd cup of coffee. He read it twice. Then he called Griffin Hartley. That conversation was not brief. It was also not one that Griffin Hartley would remember fondly. By 9:30 that same morning, Charles Delaney had located the original reservation for Warren Carter, verified the 2 confirmation records in the system, identified the date and time of Griffin's unilateral reallocation decision, and established that no attempt had been made to contact the original party in advance. He had also determined, through a question he put to Corey during a 10-minute conversation in the service corridor, that the initial hesitation at the hostess stand had not been about the reservation being missing. It had been about something else entirely. Corey, who was 24 and who had only been working at Aldridge for 7 months, told Charles what he had observed, that Griffin had looked at the reservation, looked at Warren Carter, and made a decision that was not based on the reallocation issue, which had not yet been raised. The reallocation had come up afterward as a rationale. Charles Delaney stood in the service corridor for a long moment after Corey finished speaking. "Thank you," he said. "Go ahead and start your prep." He went back to his office. He sat down. He looked at the window, which faced a brick wall. Then he picked up his phone and called the number on the reservation. Warren was in his car heading toward the Edens Expressway when his phone rang through the Bluetooth speaker. He didn't recognize the number, but he answered. "Mr. Carter." The voice was even and unhurried. "My name is Charles Delaney. I own Aldridge. I'm calling because I reviewed last night's incident report, and I need to speak with you directly. If this is a bad time, I can call back." Warren merged onto the expressway. "It's not a bad time," he said. Charles told him what he had learned. He told him about the reallocation, about Griffin's decision, about what Corey had said in the service corridor. He did not minimize any of it or attempt to reframe it. He said at one point, "I want to be clear that I'm not calling to offer you a free dinner. I'm calling because what happened was wrong, and because the reason it happened appears to be something I'm obligated to take seriously, and I would like to understand what you experienced from your perspective." Warren listened to all of this without interrupting. He kept his eyes on the road and his hands on the wheel. When Charles was finished, Warren said, "What do you intend to do about your floor manager?" There was a brief pause. "That's been addressed," Charles said. "He's no longer employed at Aldridge." Warren nodded once, though there was no one to see it. "And the practice of reallocating reservations based on client preference?" "It's not something I sanctioned," Charles said. "I'm implementing a review of how that kind of decision gets made." Warren drove in silence for a moment. He was passing a stretch of the expressway where the overpasses were in poor repair, a fact he had noted in a report 2 years ago that was still working its way through the relevant administrative channels. "I appreciate the call," he said. "I'd like to offer you a return reservation," Charles said. "The window table. Whatever date works for your son's next visit. I'll hold it personally." "That's not necessary," Warren said. "No," Charles said, "it isn't necessary, but I'd like to do it." Warren considered this. "I'll ask Philip," he said. "If he wants to, we will." "That's fair," Charles said. There was a brief pause, the kind that comes at the natural end of a conversation between two people who have said what needed to be said. "Can I ask you something?" Charles said. "You can ask," Warren said. "What would you have done if I hadn't called?" Warren thought about this for a moment. The expressway opened up ahead of him, the lanes widening toward the interchange. "I sent an email last night," he said, "to the regional director of the Illinois Department of Human Rights. I described what happened factually and asked a specific question about investigation thresholds. The silence on the other end of the line was brief but complete. "I see," Charles said. "I wasn't certain anything would come of it," Warren said, "but I wanted it on record." Yes, Charles said. "That's reasonable." They ended the call a few minutes later. Warren drove the rest of the way to the site in Joliet without playing music or turning on the radio. He was thinking about the overpasses, and about Philip's flight home, and about the small brown notebook in his jacket pocket that had the name of a restaurant he had visited exactly once written in it, along with a date and a confirmation number, and the name of a hostess who had looked at him for 2 seconds and made a decision. He thought about that for a while, and then he set it aside, because the site was coming up and he needed to be present for it. Patricia Lund responded to his email 4 days later. She acknowledged receipt, noted that the account he had described raised preliminary questions under Section 5102 of the Illinois Human Rights Act, and informed him that a compliance officer would be in contact to discuss next steps. The process, she noted, could take several months and would depend on documentation he was able to provide. Warren read the email at his kitchen table on a Tuesday morning. He forwarded it to his personal archive folder and made a note in the brown notebook. He had the confirmation number. He had the 2 confirmation emails. He had the name of the floor manager and the time of the interaction. He had, without having planned it, a fairly complete record. This was not unusual for him. He was a man who paid attention to things, who wrote things down, who understood that the distance between what happened and what could be demonstrated was often the most important distance in any situation. He had learned this the long way, across a career that had asked him repeatedly to make precise assessments in the presence of incomplete information. He closed the notebook and finished his coffee. The site review in Joliet had gone well. The report was already drafted. Philip had made it back to Portland safely and had texted the following day to say that the steakhouse had been, in his words, genuinely better than I expected. Warren had not mentioned the email or Patricia Lund's response or the fact that Griffin Hartley no longer worked at Aldridge. He would tell Philip eventually. He would tell him in the way he told his son most things, directly, without dramatizing it, at a moment when it seemed useful to know. Philip was going to have to navigate a world that made the kind of decision Griffin Hartley had made, and the useful thing was not to be angry about it. The useful thing was to understand it clearly and to know what levers existed and to use them with precision. That was a thing Warren had not been taught. It was a thing he had assembled over time from experience and from paying attention, and from the habit of writing things down in small brown notebooks. He thought Philip was getting there. 2 months later, on a Saturday in January, Warren Carter and his son Philip sat at a window table on the 42nd floor of the Harrington Tower. The table was the same one they had been turned away from in November. The view of the lake was exactly what the photograph on the restaurant's website had suggested it would be. Dark water, city lights at the margin, the kind of view that reminded you of the scale of things. Their server was a young woman named Angie Rice, who had been working at Aldridge for 2 years, and who had not been present the night in November and who had no particular knowledge of what had happened. She was professional and attentive, and she made a recommendation about the halibut that turned out to be correct. Philip ordered the halibut. Warren ordered the lamb. They talked about Philip's work and about a book Warren had been reading, and about their plans for the spring, when Warren had tentatively agreed to visit Portland for the first time in 3 years. At one point, Philip looked out the window at the lake for a long moment. "This is a good table," he said. "Yes," Warren said. "Worth the wait." Warren considered the question with the same attention he gave to most questions. The lake was black and still at this hour, and the lights of the buildings along the shore were reflected in it in long, broken lines. "That's not really the point," he said. Philip looked at him. "What is the point?" Warren thought about the brown notebook. He thought about the confirmation number he had written down in November, and the email he had sent from his kitchen table at 11:15 at night, and the careful factual account he had assembled of a thing that had happened to him and his son in a corridor outside a restaurant. He thought about the overpasses in Joliet, and about the difference between force and precision, and about all the things that took longer than they should but moved. Eventually, if you applied pressure to the right places and kept the record accurate. The point, he said, is that the record is accurate. Philip was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Okay." The food arrived, they ate. The lake stayed where it was, dark and very large, and the evening moved on around them the way evenings do when nothing is being performed, quietly and without ceremony and at its own pace.